Hey, watch out because Florentino Pérez has kicked off these elections with a very flashy move, and yes, it's a banner. And apparently, it's in the same place where Laporta put his. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Madridistas. How are you? How's it going? That is still pending, and the deadline should be today by midnight. In Valdebebas at the Real Madrid offices, Enrique for Riquelme to submit all the documentation, which is the paperwork required to run in the elections, with the bank guarantee of 187 million that we talked about yesterday, which would have been accepted by a bank from Andorra, Ant Bank. Apparently, he has also done it with another bank, not a Scottish one, but a Canadian one called Scotiabank. Well, Scotiabank. Well, with all the doubt that was raised by the fact that the Spanish banks hadn't accepted it, then did he end up having to try foreign banks? But well, everything would be within the law and what the bylaws allow, because they can be foreign banks, but through Spanish subsidiaries that are registered with the Bank of Spain. I think that's more or less how it is, although it also really caught our attention that no Spanish bank accepted it. It was strange, and we asked ourselves that question in the last video. But anyway, I insist that's how it seems. Of course he's going to run, although he still has to take that final step of submitting all the paperwork today before midnight and speak up and say something. And above all, to counteract dramatic moves, but not just that, to counteract the entire history of Florentino Pérez at Real Madrid. That's why he cleverly put up this banner, right? And for that, I insist Enrique Riquelme. Earlier, I heard Diego Serrano say that it should be today when he says, besides presenting all the paperwork, which coach is he bringing, which sporting director, let alone which signings, or maybe that will happen during the election campaign, but what about giving names, right? By the way, just to mention, it's not so much about the names, or not so much that Enrique Riquelme could beat Florentino Perez because of the names, but apparently that's what they're advising him. It's more about the club ownership model. In fact, the other day when he talked about possibly the last elections, and why do they want to privatize it, or that's what people are talking about, he should have been a bit more clear about that. Enrique Riquelme, well, I think that's where he's going to base a big part of his election campaign, to try to hurt Florentino because of that Perez. But anyway, in any case, whether he says it today or not, which coach he would go with, which sporting director, or he leaves it for tomorrow or for the next few days, I don't think it will happen today since Madrid is playing, plus Carvajal's farewell, so all the focus will be there. Well, look, Florentino has taken the first step because Florentino has already submitted his candidacy, of course, and he doesn't need the guarantee because the club's statutes state that once you're in, you don't need it anymore. Maybe I've simplified that too much, way too much, but anyway, that's how it is. And so Glasgow, Lisbon, Milan, Cadiz, Kiev, Paris, London, the 7 European Cups, the 7 Champions Leagues that Florentino Perez has won as president of Real Madrid in 2 terms. One in the first term before he left in 2006, which was Zidane's volley in Glasgow, and 6 in the second term. That is, in recent years, which is very impressive given Florentino Perez's recent past at Real Madrid, which might be slightly balanced out by the last 2 years. But even so, of course, you present this and say, hey, and how many has Barca won? Well, none in the last 11, right? Of course, that's very impressive. That's very impressive. Countering that is really tough. I think Florentino has everything in his favor to win. I mean, it would seem like a miracle to me if Florentino lost. If Enrique Riquelme won, by the way, as Calabres says here, I don't know. I look at this photo and I look at this one, and they don't seem to be in the same place to me, even though both are near the Bernabeu, right? But, well, I guess that's how it is. That's how it is. I'm not saying it's not. I mean, come on, especially if Jorge Calabres says so. Another thing, not just the venues of the last Champions League titles won by Real Madrid, the ellipsis and the motto, a lot of history still to be made with Florentino 2026, right? For the elections for president of Real Madrid. Of course, that a lot of history to make makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it will be the main motto or one of the mottos, because we saw or were sold a version of Florentino who, in his own words, with a lot of energy still, who wasn't sick and was doing well and all that. And we were glad about that. That was the best news in that press conference, wasn't it? And well, here, a project for the future, because look at what we've achieved and what we can keep achieving. Honestly, I think it's a great decision. Well, let's get to the Game of Thrones thing, the one I want to talk to you about. Because, and let's make a distinction, even before the elections were called, people were already talking about Anas Lagari. Jose Angel Sanchez, who is the one who has Florentino's ear, who is going to be the strong man in the coming years and so on, before the elections. Now, people talk little about that because, of course, the figure of Enrique de Riquelme, has burst onto the scene. And it was Florentino, precisely Florentino, who put him on the map, by the way. And from that moment on, this gentleman has spoken 2 or 3 times and so on. That's on one hand, Anas Lagari and Jose Angel Sanchez in the Florentino matter. But there's a person here named Carlos Ocaña, whom we talked about in the last video. And I want to correct something here, or clarify it, expand on it. Above all, thanks to a subscriber who, or viewer, I don't know if he's a subscriber or not, who wrote to me and said, let's see, Miguel Serrano, Carlos Ocaña is already at Real Madrid. He's the head of the basketball division. And it's true. And I don't know what happened yesterday when I posted and now you'll see when I posted this video from ABC where he appeared. He mentions that this man is very close to Pedro Sanchez, to the PSOE and so on, and he was linking him to Pedro Sanchez. Enrique Riquelme's candidacy? And the thing is, of course, I had already heard in a video by Latico. Let's see if one day I invite Latico here to the show and both Miguel Serranos collaborate, because Latico's name is also Miguel Serrano. It's going to be fun. I'll try to call him soon so we can make it happen. I'd really like that. He has great information and his channel is growing quickly. Plus, I really like him. We've known each other for years. And he said that. It was being said that maybe Carlos Ocaña, who, yes, is a man who is part of Real Madrid, already responsible for the basketball section, by the way. The basketball section is doing very well. We're going to play the EuroLeague final, as we mentioned yesterday, even with important absences. The thing with Garuba, he might be out for a year, but we had already lost Tavares Allen before. Well, it's terrible. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. And if Madrid wins the EuroLeague in the Final Four, it will be a real miracle. Well, this man is in charge of the basketball division, Carlos Ocaña. But Miguel said in that video that there was talk he could be there, that he could be a kind of Trojan horse there. That's what was being said. It wasn't Miguel who said it. It wasn't Miguel, that it was a bit up in the air that maybe this man could be there plotting something to be with Riquelme in the future, right? Even while at Real Madrid. And that's why maybe in this video, in this part of the ABC podcast, this man said this. Hold on, I'll play it for you. Here it goes.
A group close to Pedro Sanchez.
Speaking of a group close to Pedro Sanchez, of people who would be part of Enrique Riquelme's candidacy.
In that sense, Rosauro Pablo. This is the son-in-law of Ignacio Sanchez Galan. Well, this one from Cox, who has resigned. And there the core is that...
By the way, the son-in-law of Ignacio Sanchez Galan, whose name is David Mesonero, from what I can tell, I think he's the complete opposite of Pedro Sanchez. But anyway, hey, he puts him in there too. I don't know why, but he puts him in there too.
The guy, Carlos Ocaña, he's the one who wrote Pedro Sanchez's thesis. Of course, it's no. I love it when the titles are like CP's representative on Indra's board and vice president of Telefonica. So basically, they want to peso-ize Real Madrid.
It's just that Soto Ibars, who's a guy I find really funny. Rebecca Argudo is also there. And Fran Carrillo and I had her on the Politics channel one day, and she's also a brilliant woman. Soto Ibars admits he knows nothing about soccer, but he enjoys the Game of Thrones like drama at Madrid. That's just how it is. The phrase they want to pesoize Real Madrid is really funny. But of course, this man here, Alfonso J. Ucia, is bringing Carlos Ocaña into this as part of Enrique Riquelme's candidacy. And I haven't watched the whole podcast, but I think it's a bit confusing for people. In fact, yesterday, I didn't react yesterday just to say this. And thanks to the viewer, I'm making this video mainly to tell you more, to give more information about who this gentleman is. Who is not with Riquelme, despite what people might say. And now we give a little hint that makes you say, oh, the truth is I have to watch a lot of movies for that, but there could be something there. All right. Carlos Ocaña, co-author with Sanchez of the book Plagiado about his thesis, because that really does seem to be true. You might say we're off to a bad start, but he's in charge of basketball at Real Madrid. He has an economics degree and was previously assistant to the club's general manager, Jose Angel Sanchez. And for the past year, he has been a member of the executive committee, a position he held alongside being vice president of the Telefonica board. He has handled basketball for the past year. Like I said, Real Madrid's basketball team is doing quite well, especially this year when we might become European champions again. But listen, I came across this article from capitalmadrid.com written by Andres Romero, in which he says, the club's director of corporate projects is credited with the move to call early elections. Carlos Ocaña, Florentino Pérez's strategist who turned down leading Indra for Real Madrid, is considered the successor to the Real Madrid president. He was formerly the economic office director at Moncloa and Telefonica vice president. Of course, then, former director of the economic office at Moncloa, vice president of Telefonica, who co-authored Pedro Sanchez's thesis, and they're telling me that Riquelme is coming with people from the PSOE, but they're already inside Madrid. It's not just the VIP box. There are PSOE politicians and politicians of all stripes. And besides, Florentino Pérez, as president of Real Madrid, has to let everyone in there. He can't make enemies. Well, Bernabeu already did it back when Franco was around, right? But not with Franco exactly, but with Milanastre, right? I might be wrong, but the main point is the president of Real Madrid won't do that. Come on, the PSOE would already be inside Real Madrid. So those theories like, no, the other one comes with the PSOE. Hey, you know, there are a lot of people in power. I mean, anything you can imagine is possible. It's possible. But look at this story, known for not being recognized, he says. Carlos Ocaña, the director of corporate projects and regulation at Real Madrid and vice president of Telefonica. He is seen as the future heir apparent of Florentino Pérez for his expected next term, and he is credited with the strategy of the ACS president to bring forward the elections in the troubled Real Madrid. Everything is in his favor. He says Ocaña's professional ties to Moncloa are strong. In fact, he was the head of the economic office at Moncloa, which was run by Miguel Sebastián before he became Minister of Industry. From the government of José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, today held by Manuel de la Rocha under Pedro Sánchez, he declined to preside over Indra because it would mean leaving his responsibilities at the club, at Real Madrid. Loyalty to the colors and his passion for Real Madrid football and basketball could work in his favor in a possible succession for the presidency, given the highly likely re-election of Florentino Pérez, who just turned 79. In addition to his responsibilities at Real Madrid, the Madrid executive is vice president of Telefonica, a member of the Digital Transformation Committee of the Prisse Group, the Advisory Council of the Hermes Institute, and the Observatory for the Analysis of Economic Development on the Internet. And he is also part of the Oversight Committee of the Forum of Forums. I mean, I wonder, when does this man have time for himself, his family to eat? He's everywhere. He's everywhere. He dodged the offer to preside over Indra. Well, it says here, the key to calling the election. Officially, Ocaña serves as deputy to the general director, Jose Angel Sanchez, although in the club's organizational chart, he reports directly to the president. From that position of privilege and influence, Ocaña is the mastermind behind the strategy that led Florentino Pérez to call for early elections. Unless the main rival shows up and so on. Well, the thing is, it says, in theory, Riquelme has a hard time getting the guarantee. Well, that's because this is from a few days ago. If all goes as planned, it's a clear behind-the-scenes effort to stop Riquelme, who supports Iberdrola president Ignacio Sánchez de Galán and his son-in-law Mesonero, a friend of Riquelme and linked professionally to the company. President of Cox Energia, Carlos Ocaña, could fulfill his great dream, to be the successor of Florentino Pérez, his protector. It would be very difficult for him if Pedro Sánchez were no longer in La Moncloa. He has just over a year or less. Do you realize that? I mean, this guy, it turns out that they're linking him to Riquelme. And I'm leaning a bit more towards this second option. He's already inside Real Madrid, and according to this gentleman's article, he wants to be his heir apparent so that in the future he can become the great successor to Florentino Pérez. So why are there those theories that he might be behind the other one? If we're being really twisted, you could think, did he convince him? Because it's clear that someone convinced him. Because look at this, you start to connect the dots. Did someone persuade Florentino Pérez to hold elections? he still had 3 years remaining. He still had 3 years left. It turns out que Florentino is convinced and says, well, it's the best way not to give the others time and to be reelected and stay another 4 years until 2030. But of course, do you remember the other day when I told you that there was already noise before? And we're finding out that apparently there was already buzz before Florentino Perez's press conference about the possibility of calling elections. And this is in the realm of assumptions and allegations, of course. How did they know in the Riquelme circle? How did they know? These are very powerful people who have access to information that regular people don't have. And a lot of the press didn't have it either. Everyone was saying, but what is Florentino going to say? What is Florentino going to say? And who would have told the others? Because apparently they started moving earlier. Who would have told the others that Florentino was going to call elections? Who from inside Real Madrid? Who is inside Real Madrid? This gentleman? I'm not saying more. All of this is alleged, of course, which is likely why they link him with the other one. There's an incredible story there, maybe a bit of a conspiracy theory, but we're not going to get into it. But anyway, it's a move that now, after reading and rereading things and all that, and with the comment from the viewer who told me, Miguel, look into it. Is Carlos Ocaña inside Real Madrid? Yes, yes. And watch out. Well, check out this situation. The others theoretically had that information since they started moving earlier. And who would have told them? Well, let me know in the comments what you think. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel. Comment, share. And that's it. I'll see you in the next one, which I think will be soon. After the match against Athletic and the farewells, the goodbyes from Alaba, from Valverde, from Valverde, from Carvajal, and from Arbeloa himself, of course, and maybe from more people. Like Ceballos, but they haven't given him a chance. See you later. Bye.